The unwelcome invitation. The first sign of their arrival was a shadow that fell across the moon. Not a cloud or an eclipse, but something far more deliberate. The massive vessel materialized from what scientists would later call a dimensional fold, its hull shimmering with colors that human eyes had never evolved to properly perceive. It was beautiful and terrible, like watching a storm form in reverse. Commander Vorian Seltris stood at the helm of the diplomatic cruiser Eternal Harmony, his 6 arms folded in the traditional gesture of peaceful intent. His species, the Korthani, had served as the primary ambassadors of the Galactic Harmony Alliance for 3 millennia. They had welcomed 47 species into the fold, each one grateful for the protection and guidance offered by their elder siblings among the stars. Earth would be number 48. The blue planet spinning below seemed almost fragile from this distance. Vorian had studied the humans extensively during the approach. They were young, barely having achieved nuclear fusion, their first stuttering attempts at faster-than-light communication having triggered the Alliance's detection systems only months ago. They were divided into hundreds of separate governing bodies, spoke thousands of languages, and seemed to spend an inordinate amount of time arguing among themselves. They would be easy to integrate. Director Maya Rodriguez stood in the United Nations Emergency Assembly Hall, watching the alien message play for the 5th time. Around her, representatives from every nation on Earth sat in stunned silence. The translation had been perfect, delivered in every major language simultaneously. The aliens had done their homework. The message was elegant in its simplicity. The Galactic Harmony Alliance welcomed Earth to the community of spacefaring civilizations. As was tradition, humanity would enter a period of protective custody lasting approximately 300 Earth years. During this time, Alliance supervisors would guide human development, ensuring they avoided the pitfalls that had destroyed so many young civilizations. Their governments would be streamlined under Alliance oversight. Their military forces would be disbanded, as the Alliance fleet would provide all necessary protection. Their scientific research would be carefully directed to prevent dangerous discoveries. It was, Vorian had explained with what seemed like genuine warmth, a generous offer. The Alliance asked for nothing in return except cooperation. They would share medical technology that would double human lifespans. They would provide unlimited clean energy. They would end hunger, cure diseases, and bring peace to a troubled world. All humanity had to do was surrender their independence. The debate that followed was the shortest in UN history. For perhaps the first time ever, every nation on Earth agreed on something. The vote was unanimous, though the reasons varied. The Americans spoke of liberty. The Russians mentioned sovereignty. The Chinese discussed self-determination. The Europeans debated human rights. Every culture, every nation, every voice said the same thing in different words. No, Director Rodriguez was chosen to deliver Earth's response not because she was the most powerful leader, but because she was the most direct. She had risen through the ranks of international diplomacy by saying exactly what she meant, a quality that had made her either beloved or despised depending on whom you asked. She stood before the communication array that had been hastily assembled in Geneva, knowing that her words would be heard not just by the aliens above, but by every human on Earth. The weight of that responsibility should have been crushing. Instead, she felt oddly calm. Commander Vorian received the transmission on his bridge, surrounded by his senior staff. He had prepared for various responses: gratitude, confusion, perhaps requests for clarification or negotiation. He had not prepared for what he heard. "Commander Seltris," Rodriguez began, her voice carrying the steel of someone who had made peace with their decision. "On behalf of all the nations and peoples of Earth, I thank you for your offer. We are honored to know that we are not alone in the universe, and we look forward to peaceful coexistence with the Galactic Harmony Alliance." Vorian's respiratory slits fluttered in what his species considered a smile. The humans were going to be reasonable after all. "However," Rodriguez continued, and that single word changed everything, "we must respectfully decline your offer of protective custody. Humanity has fought too long and too hard for our freedom to surrender it now, no matter how generous the terms." The bridge of the Eternal Harmony fell silent. Vorian's first officer, a crystalline being from the Zalanti collective, flickered through several color spectrums of shock. The tactical officer, a heavily armored Braxian, actually took a step backward. "We appreciate your concern for our safety," Rodriguez went on, her tone remaining diplomatically neutral even as her words carried revolution. But we prefer to make our own mistakes. We choose to face whatever dangers await us as a free species. We will rise or fall by our own choices, not under the guidance of others, no matter how wise or well-intentioned they may be. Vorian found himself doing something he hadn't done in centuries of diplomatic service. He asked for clarification, certain there had been some error in translation. "You are refusing," he transmitted back, his harmonious voice carrying across the void. "No species has ever refused protective custody. You do not understand the dangers. 60% of species that develop without guidance destroy themselves within a century. The quantum cascade alone has claimed 12 civilizations. The risks are ours to take," Rodriguez interrupted, a breach of protocol that sent another wave of shock through the Alliance crew. "Commander, we mean no disrespect. We simply choose freedom over safety, independence over comfort, self-determination over security." The humans' next words would echo through Alliance space for years to come. "We would rather fail as ourselves than succeed as shadows of what we could have been." Vorian's 6 arms unfolded slowly, a gesture of deep disturbance among his people. In 3,000 years of service through 47 integration ceremonies, he had never encountered anything like this. Every species, every single one, had gratefully accepted the Alliance's protection. They understood the mathematics of survival. They recognized the wisdom of their elders. "Director Rodriguez," he said slowly, choosing his words with care, "perhaps we have not made ourselves clear. This is not truly a request. The Galactic Harmony Alliance has a responsibility to prevent catastrophic events that could affect neighboring systems. Your development poses risks not just to yourselves but to others. The protective custody protocol exists for the safety of all." Rodriguez's response came without hesitation. "Then we'll develop our technology away from inhabited systems. We'll take our risks in empty space, but we will not accept custody, protective or otherwise." The argument that followed lasted 6 hours. Vorian explained the benefits of Alliance membership, the technologies that would be shared, the peace that would be guaranteed. Rodriguez countered each point with humanity's need for self-determination. Vorian warned of the dangers of unguided development. Rodriguez spoke of humanity's resilience and adaptability. Vorian offered compromises: shorter custody periods, more autonomy within the system. Rodriguez held firm: complete independence or nothing. Finally, Vorian played what he believed was his strongest card. "Without Alliance membership, you will be alone. No trade with Alliance worlds. No access to our technology or knowledge. No protection from hostile species. You will be isolated in a dangerous galaxy." Rodriguez's smile was visible even through the low-resolution transmission. "Commander, with all due respect, we've been alone for our entire existence. We survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and near-extinction events without any help from the stars. We'll manage." The communication ended with Vorian's warning that the Alliance would need to discuss this unprecedented situation. He gave Earth 30 days to reconsider. Rodriguez assured him their answer would remain the same. As the Eternal Harmony withdrew to a holding position beyond Mars, Vorian compiled his report for the High Council. He described the humans' inexplicable refusal, their stubborn insistence on independence, their apparent willingness to face extinction rather than accept guidance. What he failed to include in his report, what he barely admitted to himself, was the small part of him that admired their courage. In 3,000 years, he had never seen a species choose freedom over survival. It was illogical, irrational, and probably suicidal. It was also, in its own strange way, magnificent. On Earth, the moment the alien ship moved away, humanity did what it had always done when faced with an existential threat. It got to work. Every nation opened its classified research vaults. Scientists who had been competing suddenly found themselves collaborating. Military budgets were redirected to space technology. The petty squabbles that had defined human politics for generations were set aside in the face of a greater challenge. Director Rodriguez stood in the newly formed Global Defense Council chamber, looking at the collection of generals, scientists, and engineers gathered from every corner of Earth. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "we have 30 days to show the galaxy that humanity doesn't need protection. We need to develop faster than light travel, defensive capabilities, and establish off-world colonies. Impossible, probably, but since when has that ever stopped us?" The work began immediately. In hidden facilities across the globe, Projects that had been theoretical suddenly received unlimited funding. The fusion reactor design that had been 10 years from completion was built in 10 days through sheer determination and round-the-clock construction. The quantum computer that existed only in equations became reality when 6 nations pooled their resources. The space elevator that had been deemed too expensive was approved without debate. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. James Chen, a graduate student who had been working on his thesis about quantum entanglement, suddenly found himself in a room with the world's greatest physicists. His idea, that space itself could be folded rather than traversed, had been dismissed as impossible by his professors. Now, with alien ships proving faster than light travel was possible, his impossible theory suddenly seemed worth exploring. 20 days into the 30-day ultimatum, humanity achieved something the Alliance had deemed impossible for a species at their development level. They successfully tested their first faster-than-light drive. It was crude, inefficient, and probably dangerous, but it worked. An unmanned probe traveled from Earth to Mars in 3 seconds, leaving behind a trail of quantum distortions that had Alliance sensors screaming warnings. Commander Vorian watched the test from his ship, his 6 arms trembling with a combination of fear and something else, something he didn't want to name. In 20 days, the humans had achieved what most species took centuries to develop under careful Alliance guidance. They had done it wrong, broken every safety protocol, ignored every reasonable precaution, and somehow succeeded anyway. His emergency transmission to the High Council was brief but urgent. The humans are more dangerous than we thought, not because they are violent or aggressive, but because they are innovative beyond all reasonable parameters. They do not accept impossibility as a limitation, recommend immediate intervention before they destabilize the entire sector. The High Council's response would arrive in 10 days. By then, humanity would have 3 colony ships under construction, and a defensive fleet of 17 vessels armed with weapons that shouldn't exist. The age of human independence had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. The price of independence. The Galactic Harmony, Alliance's response to humanity's defiance, was swift and predictable. If Earth would not accept protection, then Earth would receive isolation. The economic blockade was established with surgical precision, creating an invisible wall around human space that no Alliance vessel, trader, or communication would cross. High Counselor Zareth addressed the Alliance Assembly from the crystalline spires of the capital world. Her form, composed of pure energy held in a vaguely humanoid shape, pulsed with colors of authority as she spoke. The humans have chosen their path. They will receive no technology, no trade, no assistance. When they come begging for help, and they will come, perhaps we will consider a second chance at integration. Until then, they are quarantined. The blockade should have crippled humanity's development. Without access to Alliance databases, without examples of advanced technology to study, without the wisdom of elder species to guide them, the humans should have stagnated. The High Council had calculated that within 1 Earth year, 2 at most, humanity would recognize their mistake. They had not calculated on humanity's response to being told they couldn't have something. Dr. Lisa Park stood in the underground facility that had once been a particle accelerator in Switzerland, now converted into humanity's most ambitious research project. Around her, scientists from every nation worked side by side, their old rivalries forgotten in the face of a common goal. The Alliance had cut them off from the galaxy's knowledge, so they would create their own. The blockade is actually a gift, she told her team during one of their rare breaks. If they had given us their technology, we would have become dependent on it. We would have learned their way of doing things. Now we're free to find our own path. That path led in directions the Alliance had never imagined. While Alliance technology was based on principles refined over millennia, human technology grew from desperation, creativity, and a stubborn refusal to accept limitations. Where the Alliance used exotic matter for faster-than-light travel, humans discovered they could fold space using focused gravitational waves. Where the Alliance powered their ships with controlled singularities, humans developed fusion reactors that burned hotter than stars. Captain Marcus Thompson commanded humanity's first true warship, the UES Defiance. It was an ugly vessel by Alliance standards, all sharp angles and exposed weapon systems built for function over form, but it could fight. The railguns mounted along its hull could accelerate projectiles to 20% the speed of light. The nuclear missiles in its bays carried warheads that could crack small moons. The point defense lasers could create a wall of coherent light that nothing could penetrate. "We're not looking for a fight," Thompson told his crew as they patrolled the edge of human space. "But if someone brings one to us, we'll finish it." The blockade had an unexpected consequence that the Alliance hadn't foreseen. By isolating humanity, they had also isolated themselves from observing human progress. The sensor nets that monitored Earth could only detect large-scale activities. They saw ships being built and colonies being established, but they missed the revolution happening in human society itself. The threat of the Alliance had done something that centuries of diplomacy had failed to achieve. It had united humanity completely. National boundaries still existed on maps, but they had become almost meaningless in practice. Resources flowed freely to wherever they were needed most. Scientists shared discoveries instantly across the global network. Military forces trained together as a single unit. President Chen of the Pacific Federation summed it up in a speech that was broadcast across Earth. "They thought isolation would break us. They forgot that humans have always been at our best when our backs are against the wall. We don't just survive adversity, we thrive on it." 6 months into the blockade, humanity achieved another impossible breakthrough. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, working with a team of quantum physicists, discovered what they called the Whisper Network. By exploiting quantum entanglement on a massive scale, they could send instantaneous messages across any distance. The Alliance's faster-than-light communications took hours to cross the galaxy. Human messages arrived instantly. The first test of the Whisper Network revealed something extraordinary. The moment humanity activated it, they began receiving responses, not from the Alliance, but from other species living under Alliance protection. The messages were hidden, encrypted. Desperate, "Please help us," came a transmission from the Urani, a species that had been under protective custody for 800 years. "We were like you once. We refused at first. They broke us. Don't let them break you." Similar messages poured in from dozens of species. The Galactic Harmony Alliance, humanity learned, was not the benevolent protector it claimed to be. It was a cage, gilded and comfortable, but a cage nonetheless. Species under their protection didn't develop or grow. They stagnated. Their creativity and drive slowly extinguished under centuries of supervision. Director Rodriguez, now serving as Earth's de facto ambassador to these hidden voices, coordinated the responses. "We hear you," she transmitted to each species. "We understand. Hold on. Change is coming." The Alliance, monitoring only conventional communications, had no idea these conversations were taking place. They continued to believe their blockade was working, that humanity was struggling in isolation. Reports from the observation post showed increased activity around Earth, which they interpreted as desperation. Commander Vorian, still stationed at the edge of human space, was one of the few who suspected something more was happening. The humans were too calm, too organized. They should have been showing signs of internal conflict by now, fighting among themselves for resources as the pressure mounted. Instead, they seemed more unified than ever. His suspicions were confirmed when humanity's first colony ship, the New Horizon, departed Earth's system. It wasn't heading for any of the nearby star systems that the Alliance had expected. Instead, it made a faster-than-light jump to a system over 100 light-years away, a system the Alliance had marked as uninhabitable due to its binary stars and high radiation. Within days of arrival, the colonists had established a settlement. The radiation that would have killed most Alliance species was blocked by electromagnetic shields of human design. The chaotic gravity of the binary system, which should have made navigation impossible, was actually used to power their installations. They turned every disadvantage into an advantage. More colony ships followed, each heading to systems the Alliance had dismissed as worthless or dangerous. Humanity was spreading across the galaxy like seeds on the wind, taking root in places no one else would dare to go. The blockade had tried to contain them, but you cannot cage the wind. The real shock came 8 months into the blockade. A massive energy signature appeared at the edge of Alliance space, in a region that should have been empty. When patrol ships went to investigate, they found a human mining operation harvesting resources from a rogue planet, a world floating in the void between stars that the Alliance hadn't even catalogued. The mining station's commander, a cheerful woman named Captain Janet Ross, greeted the Alliance patrol with polite professionalism. "Good morning, gentlemen. You're outside Alliance space, so I'm afraid your blockade doesn't apply here. We're just conducting some resource extraction in unclaimed territory. Can we offer you some coffee? We just figured out how to grow it in zero gravity." The legal department of the Alliance spent weeks trying to find a regulation that would force the humans to leave. They found nothing. The humans had studied Alliance law during the 30-day ultimatum and found every loophole, every gray area, every unclaimed region. They were expanding everywhere the Alliance wasn't and doing it completely legally. High Counselor Zareth convened an emergency session. "They're making a mockery of the blockade," she pulsed angrily. "We must take stronger action." But stronger action required unanimous consent from all Alliance members, and that consent was becoming harder to obtain. Several species had begun asking uncomfortable questions. If the humans could develop such technology without Alliance help, why did they need protective custody? If humans could thrive in isolation, what was the point of the blockade? The Vistani representative was particularly vocal. "Perhaps we should attempt dialogue with the humans again. Their development methods, while unorthodox, are clearly effective. We could learn from them." The suggestion was voted down, but the seed of doubt had been planted. For the first time in millennia, species were questioning the Alliance's methods. The humans hadn't fired a single shot, hadn't made any aggressive moves, but they were destroying the Alliance's authority simply by existing outside of it. On Earth, the transformation continued at a breakneck pace. The planet that had once been divided was now united under a single purpose. Cities that had been rivals for centuries now shared technology freely. Corporations that had competed viciously now collaborated on massive projects. The space elevator in Kenya was built with American technology, Chinese manufacturing, European design, and funded by a coalition of African nations. Dr. James Chen, whose faster-than-light theory had started humanity's leap to the stars, stood in the command center of Earth's first orbital shipyard. Below him, 3 new warships were under construction, each one incorporating lessons learned from the previous designs. They were still ugly by Alliance standards, but they were undeniably effective. "How long until the fleet is ready?" asked Admiral Thompson, recently promoted to command Earth's growing navy. 6 months for the first wave," Chen replied. 12 for full deployment. 50 ships total, Thompson nodded slowly. "And the Alliance?" "Still thinks we're building colony ships. They're monitoring energy signatures but not design specifications. They won't know these are warships until we want them to." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent transmission from the Whisper network. It was from the Corvani, a species that had been under Alliance protection for 2,000 years. "The Alliance is mobilizing," the message read. "They're calling it a training exercise, but our sources say it's preparation for forced integration of Earth. You have perhaps 3 months before they arrive with overwhelming force." Rodriguez received the news calmly. Humanity had known this was coming. The Alliance couldn't allow their defiance to stand. It would inspire other species to resist, and the entire system would collapse. 3 months, she said to the assembled Global Defense Council. "We've done the impossible in less time. Begin Operation Exodus." Operation Exodus was humanity's contingency plan. If Earth fell, humanity would survive. Colony ships disguised as cargo vessels began departing daily. Each carried a complete genetic bank, cultural archives, and the knowledge to rebuild human civilization. They scattered in every direction to hundreds of systems, ensuring that no single attack could eliminate humanity. But Earth would not fall without a fight. The orbital defense platforms, hidden as commercial satellites, were activated. The moon base, supposedly a research station, revealed missile silos that could launch 1,000 nuclear warheads. Mars, which the Alliance believed held only a small scientific outpost, was actually home to humanity's primary military shipyard. The blockade had tried to strangle humanity. Instead, it had forced them to become something the Alliance had never encountered before. A species that refused to be controlled, that would rather die free than live as subjects. As the second year of isolation began, humanity sent one final message to the Alliance, broadcast on all frequencies for the entire galaxy to hear. "We offered peace. You gave us blockade. We sought friendship. You gave us isolation. Now we prepare for war, not because we want it, but because you've left us no choice. We will not fire the first shot, but we will fire the last. The price of our independence may be high, but it's a price we're willing to pay. From this day forward, any ship that enters human space without permission will be considered hostile. Any attempt to force integration will be met with maximum resistance. We stand ready. The question is, are you? The message was signed not by any single leader, but by every human government, every colony, every ship in space. 7 billion voices speaking as one. The Alliance fleet began its journey toward Earth, confident in their superiority. They had no idea they were sailing toward a species that had turned desperation into innovation, isolation into unity, and defiance into destiny.